Rega, the 2019-20 budget has a lower figure than the revised estimate for the previous fiscal. 61,084 crores was 2018-19, only 60,000 crores this year, and nothing. After reducing the budget from one year to the next, nothing has been added in the supplementary demands for grants. So this is incomprehensible, Mr. Chairman, because in fact, all experts have said that for this scheme to work and benefit the intended targets, you cannot do it for less than 88,000 crores. The centre had to allocate supplementary budgets for 3 straight years after original allocations were exhausted in the first few months of the respective fiscal financial years because the workers need the jobs. But those allocations in the past were delayed, people didn't get their wages on time, workers slowed down. Nobody got 100 days under BJP rule, the guaranteed 100 days of Manrega. And on top of that, I see that the fiscal year 18, below 50 days of employment was provided on average at the All India level. So in these circumstances, surely what we needed were more supplementary grants for Manrega so that people can get their wages on time, so that, and by the way, 78% of all Manrega wages MG and Manrega wages have been paid late, 78%. And what is more, they have not been paying compensation for delayed payment. So these are people who need this money from their employment to be able to live, sir, and they're not being given their money by this government. Unfortunately, fiscal year 17 is the last figure I have. 11,000 crore in wages were unpaid by the central government. And in the first 2 quarters of 17-18, 32% of the payments of all that was made. An activist filed an RTI that revealed that in fiscal year 18, there were 13.17 crore people registered under Manrega, but only 5.73 crore workers sought work and only 5.1 were given work, with the result that obviously the government was not spending the money it should have been spending. I would have said that in this was a missed opportunity to increase the allotments to the Mahatma Gandhi Manrega scheme in order to benefit people who are getting increasingly poor with the passage of time. So where will the revenues come from? Coming back to the question of the government's challenges. Not from manufacturing. The manufacturing growth rate has now been so subdued, and we all know that for our economic growth to reach the kinds of levels we once used to routinely take for granted, our manufacturing sector would need to grow in double digits. Instead, it's at a very subdued rate of around 3% for the last 5 years, from 2.8, in fact, to 4.6, averaging just above 3. The Indian automobile sector is in disastrous shape, worst ever half-yearly performance. The two-wheeler sector is plummeting, registering a major dip, and auto components, which I think the finance minister's own state was leading the country in manufacturing, have had a dip of 22%. So the result is we're looking at the worst figures in the automobile sector in the last 2 decades. And this is the crisis that we are facing. At the same time, revenues are not going to come from consumer spending, because consumer spending fell for the first time in more than 4 decades last year. Every year, for 40 years, our consumers have been spending more. Especially after Manrega came in, rural demand went up, people had more purchasing power in the rural areas. All that has gone, sir. We have seen a decline for the first time in 40 years, according to the latest consumption expenditure survey by the National Statistical Office. And what we're seeing is that the average amount of money spent by an Indian in a month has fallen from 3.7% in 2017-18 to from 2017-18, 2011-12, it's fallen by 3.7%. And what is shocking, sir, is that there appears to be a dip in food consumption, including on essential food items. The most disconcerting bit to economists has been that this is the first time it's happened in decades. Former Planning Commission member Abhijit Sen said that a fall in food spending, especially in villages, shows that malnutrition has increased. It would be fair to say that poverty has increased significantly. But there are, as I said, no new welfare schemes envisaged in the supplementary demands by the Honourable Finance Minister. What does the government wish to spend the money on? Now, we are told that allocations for the new union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh are going to get 8,821 crores. We all know that it's been nearly 4 months since on the 5th of August, the High Home Minister introduced the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bill into the upper house of Parliament. And since that time, our own citizens, our own political leaders, one of our own members has been living under a clampdown, has been living in detention. In the absence of any return to normalcy in Kashmir, these allocations to the areas would mean very little. We know that 30 political leaders were kept under detention, some of them in solitary, including a former Minister of State of the government of Mr. Vajpayee, a former Chief Minister in a coalition government with the BJP, and a currently serving MP. And what are we seeing, sir? These people, as well as other leaders, are being shunted from now one location to another, amid allegations of manhandling by the police. Meanwhile, terrorism keeps going up. According to the government's own data provided here by the MOS for Home Affairs, cross-border infiltration along the line of control has gone up by almost 50% since the provisions of Article 370, I'll just take 2 minutes more, sir, were abrogated and Kashmir was put under a lockdown. So with all the attempts at infiltration that have been reported in this House, with tourism going down, and our own Prime Minister having said to the youth of Kashmir, go for tourism and not terrorism, with communications lockdown and loss of income for telephone companies, with online merchants not able to sell their Kashmiri handicrafts and goods to the world because there is no internet, we are looking at a situation in which Jammu and Kashmir is dire and routine supplementary expenditures are not going to help. On the missing allocation, sir, and then I will conclude, I've already mentioned Unrega. Fisheries, sir. There's been a repeated demand from coastal area MPs in the state for additional funding for our coastal areas. There's rampant coastal erosion. There have been severe climatic attacks on our country. Cyclone Oki, we've heard about Cyclone Gaja in Orissa. There have been floods in many parts of the country. Kerala suffered terrible floods in August 2018 and 2019. We are shocked the government broke its campaign promise to create a dedicated fisheries ministry for this area, but the very least they can do is to have a focus on the needs of our coastal communities, particularly our fishing communities, to provide a comprehensive economic package to offset the losses they're suffering, cyclones, floods and coastal erosion, strengthen their coastal seawalls, help. This could have been easily...
That's Lok Sabha MP Shashi Tharoor speaking on the slowdown, also talking about no new welfare schemes. He's talking about Manrega earnings that have come down as well, on what the government has done for revenue creation. He's essentially listed out all the figures indicating the economic slowdown here that is being discussed, questioning what the government is doing to fix this.